The architecture of the empty soul, reversing the inner death of modern society. Have you ever noticed that there is something deeply, fundamentally wrong happening all around us? I am not talking about the crises that dominate the nightly news cycles. I am not speaking of geopolitical warfare, fluctuating economic indicators, or the slow-motion catastrophe of climate change. Instead, I am talking about something far more subtle, more pervasive, and infinitely more dangerous. It is an invisible poison trickling quietly into our interior lives, affecting us, our partners, our children, and the people we love most. It is the haunting sensation that despite being the most interconnected generation to ever walk the earth, the most highly informed population in human history, and the freest individuals to ever choose their own destiny, something essential is slowly draining out of our lives. We are quietly watching our own society decay from within, cell by cell, relationship by relationship, dream by dream. You have likely felt this malaise yourself. Perhaps it struck you the last time you went out to dinner with friends, only to realize that after the initial greetings, every person at the table instinctively retreated into the glowing rectangle of their smartphone screen, trading real presence for digital ghosts. Maybe you noticed it within the walls of your own home, waking up to the sudden, freezing realization that you haven't had a raw, unscripted, soul-bearing conversation with your spouse or children in months. Or perhaps it caught you in a quiet moment of existential vertigo when you realized you no longer know what you genuinely want from life because every single option presented to you feels entirely, irrevocably empty. This feeling is not paranoia. It is not a sign of clinical depression, nor is it merely excessive pessimism. It is the acute psychological symptom of a massive, unprecedented historical transformation occurring right before our eyes. Today, we are going to explore not just what is causing this silent internal death of our collective culture, but more importantly, the concrete, radical steps we must take to reverse this process before it is too late. Part 1. The world we left behind. The anchor of certainty. To understand the profound disorientation of the modern mind, we must first look backward and examine the evolutionary and historical terrain that shaped human consciousness for thousands of years. For the vast majority of our history, human beings did not live as atomized individuals drifting through a sea of infinite choices. They lived in small, dense, hyper-localized communities. In these environments, every single individual was born into a clear, predefined, and stable social ecosystem. Pre-modern meaning system, plus clearly defined social roles, blacksmith, baker, mother, plus daily validation via visible utility to the village, plus absence of identity crisis, high ontological security. The blacksmith knew exactly who he was. He was the keeper of the forge, the creator of tools. The baker did not suffer an identity crisis at 30. He knew his hands were meant to knead the bread that kept the village alive. The mother understood her vital, foundational role within the community's survival. These roles were far more than mere professions, financial calculations, or economic utilities. They were complete, comprehensive identities that bestowed immediate meaning, structure, and purpose upon human existence. Crucially, these identities were organically recognized and validated by the community every single day. When the blacksmith forged a plowshare, the entire village witnessed the smoke of his labor and reaped the tangible rewards of his skill. When a mother raised her children, her efforts were integrated into a collective tapestry of survival where the entire village participated and recognized the irreplaceable importance of her work. It was a closed system of constant, self-affirming meaning. Every action had an immediate, visible purpose and an instantaneous social reward. People in these societies rarely suffered from the modern affliction of wondering what they were for, because their utility was blindingly obvious to themselves and permanently reaffirmed by everyone around them. The trade-off of true belonging, of course, we must not romanticize the past with naive nostalgia. These traditional societies carried immense, often brutal limitations. Personal choice was virtually non-existent. Social mobility was an unimaginable luxury. Life paths were dictated strictly by birth, gender, and caste. Individual eccentricities were frequently crushed under the weight of dogmatic conformity, and local traditions could be deeply oppressive. Yet, despite the material hardships, the plagues, and the lack of political liberties, those societies possessed a psychological anchor that we have completely lost. A total sense of absolute purpose and unconditional belonging that was automatically provided by the very architecture of the social structure. You did not have to find yourself, because the community always knew exactly where you were. Part 2. The infinite choice revolution and the loss of meaning. The grand rupture of this ancient meaning system began with the Industrial Revolution, but it accelerated at a breakneck, terrifying speed over the last few decades through what we can call the infinite choice revolution. Suddenly, in a historical blink of an eye, we became the very first generation of human beings to have access to practically unlimited options in almost every single dimension of our lives. We can select a career from tens of thousands of highly specialized fields. We can choose to live in virtually any geographic coordinate on the face of the earth. We can open our phones and swipe through dating applications that instantly connect us to millions of potential romantic partners. We can pick our specific beliefs, our moral frameworks, our physical aesthetics, our lifestyle niches, our dietary regimes, our entertainment channels, and our hyper-specific sources of ideological information. The paradox of the modern horizon. Theoretical goal. Infinite options. Perfect self-fulfillment. Actual outcome. Overload of choice. Cognitive paralysis. Plus, theoretically, according to the dogmas of modern liberal economics, this should be the golden age of human happiness. With an infinite menu of possibilities, every single human being should be able to construct a bespoke life that perfectly aligns with their unique desires, leading to unparalleled fulfillment. But exactly the opposite has occurred. Instead of blossoming into a society of deeply fulfilled, self-actualized individuals, we have progressively transformed into a population that is anxious, chronically depressed, and fundamentally terrified about who we actually are and what we are supposed to want. The pathology of excess. This is where the famous psychological concept known as the paradox of choice reveals its darkest, most destructive truth about human nature. Our brains are evolutionary artifacts. They were carefully designed over millions of years to make rapid decisions within small tribal groups with highly constrained options. Our neurology simply lacks the hardware to process the psychological overload of modern life. But the danger goes far deeper than mere decision fatigue or the anxiety of selecting what to watch on a streaming service. The existential tragedy of modern freedom is this. When everything becomes a choice, nothing can possess inherent meaning. Consider the mathematics of meaning. If you are bound to a specific path by tradition, necessity, or duty, that path carries an objective weight. It possesses what philosophers call ontological weight, the density of inevitability. When a choice carries the weight of inevitability, it feels intensely meaningful. You do not question whether your life matters, because you are actively living out a destiny that feels larger than your ego. Inevitability/duty. High ontological weight. Deep meaning. Infinite fluid choices. Arbitrary preference. Existential vacuum. Conversely, when your life path is merely one choice among millions of equally valid, easily replaceable choices, it loses its psychological weight. If you can choose any profession, then no profession feels uniquely sacred. If you can adopt any moral code, then no moral code feels absolute. If you can swap your partner, your city, or your identity with a simple adjustment of your digital profile, your current life configuration begins to feel arbitrary, flimsy, and meaningless. By granting us the absolute freedom to choose everything, modern society has inadvertently stripped the gravity away from everything. This is why so many people walk through the world feeling simultaneously incredibly privileged and completely empty. 3. The digital panopticon of perpetual comparison, as if the weightlessness of infinite choice weren't enough. Digital technology has multiplied this psychological crisis exponentially by constructing a perpetual comparison society through the mechanism of social media algorithms. For our ancestors, comparison was limited to the people within their immediate physical vicinity. If your neighbor bought a slightly better horse or grew a slightly larger crop of wheat, that was the boundary of your envy. Today, every single human being walks around with a device in their pocket that grants them 24/7 window access into the carefully curated, filtered, and hyper-optimized highlights of billions of other human lives. This means that no matter what choice you make, you are constantly bombarded with digital evidence that someone else made a different choice, and that their choice looks significantly more exciting, more affluent, more glamorous, or more authentic than yours. If you choose to, social media will show you, resulting existential dread, marry young and build a stable family, digital nomads, traveling the world alone, drinking cocktails on Balinese beaches. Did I throw away my youth and freedom for domestic boredom? Sacrifice comfort to climb the corporate ladder, parents experiencing deep, picturesque moments of domestic bliss and spiritual connection. Am I trading my soul for a meaningless corporate cage? Live in a vibrant, bustling metropolis. Homesteaders enjoying pure serenity, clear skies, and a rustic connection to nature. Am I poisoning my lungs and mind in an urban concrete prison? This phenomenon is often trivialized as FOMO, the fear of missing out. But what we are experiencing is a far more destructive psychological illness: the total paralysis of commitment. Because we are constantly exposed to the infinite alternatives, we become utterly incapable of fully investing ourselves in the choices we have made. We live our own lives not as active, passionate participants, but as critical, detached spectators, always looking over our own shoulders, forever wondering if we should be somewhere else, doing something else, being someone else. Engineered despair, capitalism, and the tyranny of optimization. To understand why this spiritual vacuum is so difficult to escape, we must recognize that the economic engine of our world does not want you to heal. In fact, consumer capitalism relies entirely on your permanent, unyielding dissatisfaction. The math is simple. A completely content human being is an economic dead end. If you were to wake up tomorrow morning, look in the mirror, and feel a deep, abiding satisfaction with your body, your house, your relationships, and your clothes, the global consumer market would suffer an immediate crisis. The entire system works by engineering a state of permanent psychological deficiency within your mind and then selling you a temporary consumer remedy to patch the wound. Engineered insufficiency. Mechanism. Consumer purchase. Brief dopamine. Spike. Return to emptiness. This cycle has infected the realm of personal growth. The noble, ancient philosophical pursuit of self-knowledge and character development has been co-opted by the capitalist logic of hyper-optimization. We are told that our lives are personal enterprises that must be constantly upgraded. We must optimize our sleep cycles with wearable tech. We must streamline our diets with meal replacements. We must maximize our productivity with time-tracking applications. We must continuously reinvent our personal brands. This converts our very search for healing into another frantic, exhausted source of performance anxiety. We treat our own bodies and minds as inefficient software systems that require endless debugging, transforming the human experience into a relentless corporate race where the finish line is pulled forward with every step we take. The spiritual vacuum and inadequate substitutes as traditional religious institutions and local civic cultural frameworks collapsed over the course of the 20th century. They left behind a massive, yawning spiritual void in the human psyche. For millennia, organized traditions provided human beings with pre-packaged, time-tested architectures of meaning. They provided sacred rituals, formal actions that successfully marked crucial life transitions: birth, coming of age, marriage, death. True community. Intergenerational networks of emotional, physical, and spiritual support that did not depend on your economic utility. Cosmic narratives. Grand stories that placed individual, localized human suffering into a broader context of ultimate purpose. When we threw out these traditions due to their dogmatic flaws, we failed to build adequate structures to replace them. Instead, modern secular society attempted to fill this spiritual vacuum with brittle, superficial substitutes: raw consumerism, hyper-individualistic hedonism, and performative political activism. Trying to ground the existential weight of a human life in modern consumer choices is like trying to build a cathedral out of toothpicks. It may look intricate and clever for a moment, but it will inevitably collapse under the first heavy wind of personal tragedy. When a parent dies, when a chronic illness strikes, or when old age inevitably arrives, a lifestyle centered around curated consumption and political signaling offers absolutely no shelter for the soul. 6. The fragmentation of human attention. This crisis is compounded by the fact that our basic cognitive machinery has been hijacked. We live in a perpetual distraction society. The digital platforms we interact with daily are not passive utilities. They are the most sophisticated behavior modification systems ever built. Designed by armies of behavioral psychologists and data scientists, their sole objective is to capture, fragment, and monetize the finite currency of your human attention. By utilizing variable reward schedules, the exact neurological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive, these platforms have shattered our capacity for sustained concentration. Algorithmic interruption. Cortisol/dopamine spike, shallow cognitive state, atrophy of deep thought. This is an existential emergency because meaning is a function of attention. You cannot experience deep love, you cannot appreciate profound art, you cannot engage in rigorous philosophy, and you cannot cultivate a quiet, contemplative mind if your attention span has been reduced to the length of a short-form video. We have lost the ability to sit quietly in a room with our own thoughts, to tolerate the fertile ground of temporary boredom, or to engage in long, winding conversations that require hours of presence. We are trapped in a state of hyper-reactive shallow stimulation, consuming digital junk food while our souls starve for a nutritious cognitive meal. 7. Liquid bonds and the disposable community. In our new hyper-flexible world, human relationships have suffered the same fate as our consumer goods. They have become disposable. In traditional settings, relationships were deep, durable, and unyielding because they were forged out of structural necessity. You had to learn to get along with your neighbor, your cousin, or your colleague because your physical survival over the winter literally depended on their cooperation. This interdependence forced people to develop the difficult virtues of forgiveness, patience, tolerance, and long-term commitment. Today, urban anonymity and digital platforms have turned relationships into conditional transactions. We interact with others through the lens of personal convenience and consumer preference. If a friend develops a challenging personality quirk, we ghost them. If a romantic partner requires deep emotional labor, we log back onto dating apps to find a newer, less complicated model. If a community group demands our weekends, we simply drop out. Traditional relationships. Interdependence to mutual duty to unconditional belonging. Modern relationships. Transactional to convenience to liquid loneliness. This creates a society of what sociologists call liquid modernity, a state where all human bonds are too fluid to hold any stable shape. We end up with thousands of digital connections, hundreds of superficial professional acquaintances, and absolutely no one who will sit by our bedside in the middle of a dark night without checking their notifications. 8. The abstract economy and the alienation of labor. We must also look at how the very mechanics of modern work erode our internal vitality. The vast majority of modern professionals labor within hyper-fragmented, highly abstract corporate bureaucracies. Unlike the artisan or the farmer of antiquity, whose work yielded an immediate, tangible and visible impact on the physical world, the modern knowledge worker operates in a realm of pure simulation. The chain of modern labor alienation, inputting data into software, plus processing abstract corporate compliance forms, plus sending emails to invisible departments, plus total disconnection from tangible human benefit. This structural separation between human energy and real-world outcomes produces deep, systemic work alienation. People spend 40 to 60 hours a week, the absolute best, most energetic hours of their lives, performing tasks that they secretly feel make absolutely no difference to the world. We are trapped in a psychological cage where we feel simultaneously immensely guilty for being unhappy with our comfortable office jobs and profoundly hollowed out by the sheer lack of tangible meaning in our daily labor. 9. The tyranny of mandatory happiness. Perhaps the most insidious twist of our current cultural predicament is the rise of mandatory happiness culture. Because our society operates on the premise that you have total freedom to design a perfect life, any manifestation of lingering sadness, emptiness, or existential despair is treated as a personal, shameful failure. If you are not happy, the culture whispers, it is because you haven't bought the right book, downloaded the right meditation app, or chosen the right mindset. This builds an extra, agonizing layer of suffering, the meta-suffering of shame. We feel empty, and then we feel deep shame for feeling empty in a world that has given us so many options. To survive socially, we put on the mask of false optimism. We post our perfectly staged vacation photos, we use enthusiastic corporate buzzwords, and we pretend everything is exceptional. Real existential pain to cultural rejection of sadness, to forced mask of optimism, to isolation and silence. By outlawing public melancholy, we have destroyed the vital social rituals and languages required to collectively process the natural tragedies of the human condition. We have forgotten that sorrow, grief, and existential disorientation are not psychological defects to be medicated away instantly. They are foundational, sacred components of a fully realized human life. The catalyst for awakening. Reframing the pain now, let us pause and take a deep, collective breath. We have laid bare the mechanics of the modern cultural disease. The picture looks bleak, dark, and overwhelming. But it is precisely here at the absolute nadir of our diagnosis that the light breaks through. The ultimate realization is this. The very emptiness you feel inside is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are sane. Your existential pain, your anxiety, your feeling of profound disconnection when looking at your phone, these are not psychological failures. They are a healthy, vibrant, and heroic immune response from your deepest human nature. Your soul is actively resisting a way of living that is psychologically unsustainable. Just as a physical fever is proof that your body is fighting off a biological pathogen, your inner emptiness is proof that your humanity is fighting to stay alive inside an artificial cultural ecosystem. Modern cultural ills, conflict, your deep evolutionary core, existential dissatisfaction, the sign that you are sane. The cure for this inner death does not lie in seeking more options, downloading more optimization software, or running faster on the consumer treadmill. The cure begins with a total, unapologetic revolt against the foundational premises of modern lifestyle design. It requires us to step off the axis of horizontal expansion and step onto the axis of vertical depth. 11. The Manifesto for the Depth Revolution. To heal our lives and reverse the decay of our communities, we must initiate what we can call the depth revolution. This is a conscious, structured return to psychological gravity through the deliberate choice of constraint over freedom and quality over quantity. The 4 pillars of depth. 1. Voluntary hard boundaries. Limit tech, stimuli, and options. 2. Radical commitment. Stay put when it gets difficult. 3. Interdependence over ease. Become necessary to real people. 4. Sacralizing the mundane. Find infinity in the simple plus. 1. The implementation of voluntary constraints. If infinite choice strips away meaning, then the creation of conscious voluntary boundaries is the only way to restore it. You must deliberately choose to limit your choices. Digital monasticism. Establish strict, non-negotiable boundaries around technology. Create zones in your house, like the dinner table and the bedroom, that are completely analog. Declare one day a week as a digital Sabbath, turning off your internet access to force your attention back into the physical world. Radical commitment. Choose a few specific paths, one career discipline, one geographical community, one partner, a small circle of true friends, and drop your anchor there. Stop looking for the upgrade. Commit to staying put even when the novelty wears off and things become tedious, because it is only on the other side of boredom and difficulty that deep meaning is forged. 2. Rebuilding the interdependence network. We must consciously move out of relationship modes based on consumer preference and step into networks based on shared duty and mutual responsibility. Atomized self. Swap for the embedded self. Relationships for pleasure. Relationships for mutual survival. Easy escape routes. Sacred vows and community duties. Digital network vanity. Physical presence and accountability. Become locally necessary. Find local organizations, neighborhood associations, or creative projects where your physical presence and work are genuinely needed for the group to function. Learn practical, tangible skills that allow you to help others in the real world. Gardening, carpentry, cooking, caregiving. Choose responsibility over convenience. When someone in your life is struggling, resist the modern urge to protect your personal boundaries at all costs. Step toward them. Allow your life to be complicated by the genuine needs of others. When you become necessary to the well-being of real people, your existential emptiness vanishes instantly. 3. Cultivating the wisdom of enough in a culture designed to keep you running forever. Developing the internal capacity to look at your life and say, "This is enough," is a radical, subversive political act. Optimize your leisure. Intentionally engage in activities that have absolutely no economic or self-improvement utility. Sit on a bench and watch the rain fall without listening to an educational podcast. Walk through the woods without tracking your heart rate. Bake bread simply to smell the yeast. Read long, difficult books that require days of uninterrupted focus. Sacralize the everyday. Shift your focus from accumulating extraordinary experiences to deepening your presence within ordinary ones. A slowly prepared family meal, a long evening walk with a neighbor, or a quiet hour of meditation contains more genuine existential density than a lifetime of superficial luxury travel documented for Internet Clout. 12. The blueprint for systemic renaissance. While our individual choices are foundational, we must recognize that we cannot fully solve a systemic crisis through individual willpower alone. We need to collectively advocate for a sweeping restructuring of our social architecture. BUS. The balanced well-being. Ecosystem. BUS. Humane spaces, well-being metrics, humane tech design, walkable cities, gross national algorithms that public parks, and happiness over elevate instead of communal hubs. Unfettered GDP monetizing rage. 1. The architecture of connection. We must completely rethink urban and suburban design. Modern cities and suburbs are engineered for economic transit and isolated consumption. We must demand the construction of walkably dense neighborhoods, public plazas, community gardens, and open-access community halls, physical spaces specifically designed to force human beings into spontaneous, casual, face-to-face contact. 2. The restructuring of economic values. We must fiercely advocate for policy shifts that move our societal definitions of progress away from raw gross domestic product, GDP, and toward comprehensive well-being economies. This means valuing job stability over frantic labor flexibility, protecting family and community time through statutory leave and shorter working hours, and structurally honoring the fields of caregiving, education, and artistic preservation. 3. The taming of the digital beast. We must exert immense collective pressure on technology conglomerates to fundamentally transform the ethical framework of software design. We need to demand algorithms designed to protect human cognitive health rather than maximize psychological reactivity. This means advocating for platforms built to facilitate local, deep encounters rather than scrolling addictions, and regulations that protect children from the weaponized algorithms of attention extraction. 13. The long road to healing. The journey to reverse the inner death of our society will not be swift, nor will it be easy. It requires us to actively challenge the very assumptions that have underpinned our global culture for half a century. It requires us to trade certain forms of superficial freedom for real, heavy purpose. It demands that we accept a degree of discomfort, boredom, and social friction in exchange for the priceless gift of unconditional belonging. Most of all, it requires a rare, quiet courage, the courage to live according to your deepest human needs even when the entire world is screaming at you to keep scrolling, keep consuming, and keep optimizing. Choose wisely. The path of horizontal drifting. Infinite options. Superficial connections. Perpetual weightlessness. The path of vertical depth, chosen boundaries, radical presence, unshakable meaning, But remember, you are not alone in this landscape. This very moment, millions of people all over the planet are staring at their screens, feeling the exact same phantom ache, the exact same heavy intuition that we have lost our way. The tide is beginning to turn. The fever is breaking. Real's social transformation has never begun with a top-down mandate. It has always ignited within the quiet choices of individuals and small circles who had the audacity to live out a different vision of human dignity. It begins tonight, when you close your laptop, put your phone in a drawer, sit across from someone you love, look directly into their eyes and simply stay there.